Kelly Cannon, and this is the Salt Lake Tribune Daily Buzz, a video series where we bring you the important story of the day. Homeless shelters will now be allowed to be built in most areas in Salt Lake City, thanks to a new ordinance passed by the City Council last week. Mayor Erin Mendenhall called the new rules a, quote, much-needed improvement to how the city decides where shelters go. She said, quote, instead of concentrating services in one or two neighborhoods, the new ordinance requires a holistic and transparent process that better accounts for the well-being of unsheltered residents and impacts on surrounding neighborhoods. Now, previously, shelters were only allowed to be built in a few zones, primarily around I-15 and downtown. Under the new ordinance, homeless shelters will be permitted in all zoning except for those in manufacturing. The new ordinance was approved by a unanimous city council vote, just as a moratorium on new shelters was set to expire. In 2021, Mayor Mendenhall issued an order that temporarily banned the development of new shelters. The council then voted last year to extend that pause, while city staffers created new regulations. So here are the new rules regarding homeless shelters in Salt Lake City. Under the new ordinance, anyone who wants to open a homeless shelter will need to apply for a special zoning amendment and get the council's approval. Previously, shelters could only be built in an allowable zone and had to get approval from the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit, which sidestepped the city council's input. In order for an applicant to be considered, they must provide a detailed list of anticipated support services that would be available on site, the identified funding sources, and the anticipated funding requests to the city. The hope is by opening up the entire city to potentially hosting a homeless shelter, the new regulations will provide more geographic equity. Now, these new regulations do not affect existing shelters and would require the City Council to hold a public hearing within 90 days of the city receiving a proposal for a new shelter. The council will then consider a vote within a reasonable time after that. The council will take into consideration how close the proposed facility is to other shelters, how it would affect the city services, the anticipated impact on public spaces within a quarter mile, equity among neighborhoods in hosting shelters, and the proximity to support services. If support services aren't within walking distance, a transportation plan would also be required. Now, the new ordinance also sets up rules for how temporary shelters work, which are allowed when temperatures are expected to drop below freezing and when existing shelters are expected to be at capacity, as well as when the state requires emergency shelters during the winter months. Now, reaction to the new ordinance seems to be mixed, with people praising the chances in geographic equity while also being wary of potential problems that come with homeless shelters. Now, Turner Bitton, chair of the Glendale Neighborhood Council, lauded the end of the moratorium and said expanding the placement of shelters is a win for the city, even if some have concerns about the politics seeping into the conversation about where to put them. He said the biggest improvements the city could make in how it handles the development of homeless shelters is for neighborhoods to embrace sheltering unhoused population. He said, while I don't minimize the impacts that shelters can have, we have a moral responsibility to be supportive of sheltering folks that are unsheltered. Now, Judy Short, the vice chair of the Sugar House Community Council, said she personally has no problem with allowing shelters in more areas, but noted others do take issue with hosting potentially challenging facilities. She said, quote, homeless shelters seem to attract people who use drugs and people who sell drugs. That is just one example. If there's no way to keep those people away from the homeless shelter, then they will gather there. Now, we want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this new rule that says that a homeless shelter can be built in any part of Salt Lake City? Do you think this is the right step when it comes to making sure that the geographic areas are equitable when it comes to hosting homeless shelters? Be sure that you comment below, or you can tweet us at SLTrib. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. If you want all of our videos, including the Daily Buzz videos, as soon as they are live, be sure that you're subscribed. You can also find us on social media such as TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at SLTrib. Thanks.